Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC Football Podcast. My name is Joey Weaver. He is Mike McDaniel. Mike, first question. Your program's got to replace a generational talent at quarterback. How do you feel about it?
This might be one of those rare situations where I would feel better than most would. But, we got somebody perfect to discuss this with us. Ethan Moore joining us on the show tonight to help us preview the Louisville Cardinals, of course, replacing Lamar Jackson. He is the host of Louisville Sports Live on 93.9 The Ville there in Louisville. Ethan, thanks for joining us, man. How you doing?
Great, guys. Thanks for having me. Certainly appreciate it. Always look forward to talking ACC sports.
Yes, sir. That's what we do here. A lot of people, a lot of the outsiders don't really understand the reference of basketball conference. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but we are certainly a football podcast, if nothing else. Ethan, it's great to have you on. We're excited to preview Louisville. The people that listen to this podcast often would know that this is kind of my secondary team. I've got a lot of family from Louisville. Louisville is a big thing in my family. And so the Cardinals, definitely my secondary team after Georgia Tech. And so looking back on the last couple of years, 2016 team got off to a really strong start, 9-1, and then the thing kind of fell off at the end. Lamar Jackson wins a Heisman Trophy. It was great. Came back in 2017. There were some more difficulties that happened, particularly with the defense. There were some games that kind of got away from the team a little bit. And now going into 2018, Ethan, you got to replace Lamar Jackson, who I think we can agree, again, was this generational talent. He was a great quarterback. And the thing I've been saying on this podcast for a couple of months now is that there's a significant difference between generational talent and pretty good. And there's a lot of people that think that Juwan Puma Pass can be pretty good. Talk to me about what we should expect from him and how much of a step down this is from what we've got in the last couple of years with Lamar Jackson.
Well, in terms of athleticism, that's going to be the number one component that you're going to see as soon as Louisville takes the field against Alabama on September 1st. He has got, again, this is just based on reports from practice, he has got a cannon for an arm. His accuracy is reportedly better than Lamar Jackson's was at this time. He can run if need be. There's not going to be a lot of play calls for him to run. There'll be some, but not very many. But he is Bobby Petrino's the prototype drop-back quarterback. He's going to take the ball under center. They're going to be able to utilize the play action. And, a lot of times they tried to with Lamar, but everybody knew he was going to keep the ball, and it never really worked, at least as well as Petrino and company would have liked. But I think that's the main component is the athleticism. But I think you're going to see with Puma better accuracy, a stronger arm, a typical Petrino quarterback, and I think you're going to see offensively with Louisville, they're going to have a lot more balance.
Let's talk about the running game a little bit. Did we lose him? We good? Oh, we're good. Okay. Let's talk about the running game a little bit because a year ago they lost Colin Wilson in the opener. Essentially, gained a medical red shirt. He's going to be able to play this year at running back. Let's talk about the running game and how that will help Juwan Pass here at the outset, because we know that Louisville's got plenty of skilled players on the outside at receiver, but how's this running game going to look? Because we're not going to get nearly as many runs out of the quarterback position as we've seen in years past with Lamar Jackson.
That's a great question. In the main, I guess, topic for Louisville fans right now in the offseason is the health of the running backs. You mentioned Colin Wilson was a fantastic talent, and also Day Williams. That's the 1-2 combo that most fans expect to see. They have shown glimpses of being very talented playmaking backs, but the sample size is pretty small because they cannot stay healthy. Also, another name to look for is Trey Smith. He got some reps in garbage time last year. Coach Petrino said right now he is number one on the depth chart. People have speculated that he's using that as a motivational tactic to get Williams and Wilson a little bit more motivated. Not saying that they have to have that additional motivation, but a lot of people are speculating as to why he said that in the first place. But I think with Day Williams, you have, and Colin Wilson, really, you don't have a lot of breakneck speed, but you do have good vision and you have a good combination of speed and power. So it's a big if those running backs stay healthy, I'm really bullish on Louisville offensively this year because, again, with Petrino's best teams at Louisville, and that's going back to 03 to 06, he was so successful offensively because he allowed the run game to set up the pass. With Lamar, he was, like Joey said from the start, he was a generational talent. 100% agree. However, Petrino's offensive philosophy, he had to, his bread and butter is the pro style. He wasn't able to use that the last 2.5 years because Lamar Jackson, that wasn't fit for his game. So I'm excited about the running game. If the backs stay healthy, Petrino will use them to set up the pass. And you're going to hear a lot of pass completes a pass to, so on and so forth, Jalen Smith, Des Fitzpatrick, so on and so forth. But for the running backs, Trey Smith is another name I think ACC fans will keep an eye out for, especially if they're playing Louisville. Those three backs right there, good power, good speed, not great speed, but a good combination of both of those aspects.
It's an interesting point, Ethan, that the last couple of years with Lamar Jackson at the helms have definitely been a different looking offense than we're used to seeing from Bobby Petrino at the college level. You look at his first stint at Louisville, even his time at Arkansas, the offense he was running was significantly different than the run heavy, utilizing the quarterback mobility kind of stuff that you saw the last couple of years from Lamar Jackson. And so getting into more of a pass first natured quarterback of Puma Pass might make more sense and really have less of a drop off maybe than some people are expecting. I want to talk about the defense real quick and going back a couple of years to when Charlie Strong left and went to Texas. Bobby Petrino, correct me if I'm wrong, when he came back initially, he hired he hired Todd Grantham to come with him to Louisville that first year. And I remember telling a couple of family friends, again, Louisville fans, and saying, I feel like they need to do something over the next couple of years to improve the offense because the defense is going to fall off. And that's what we've seen. And I think last year you saw it fall off significantly after Todd Grantham left to go to Mississippi State, joins Dan Mullen down there. And Louisville essentially pulls off a trade, pulling Peter Sherman from Mississippi State. And it became pretty clear Mississippi State won that trade. Yes. The defense was – they weren't good, and it was significantly different when Jair Alexander was and wasn't on the field. Now they've got to replace Alexander, Chucky Williams, Zykees Cannon, and Tremaine Washington in the back, Stacey Thomas, Trevon Young, and James Hearns in the linebacking core. I wanted to get your take on where the defense is this year. They bring in Brian Van Gorder, who is Mike and I have decided that we are going to lovingly refer to as the Notorious BVG. As many fans will love him here on the podcast. But Ethan, where are we at on the Louisville defense this year? Are there high hopes? Is this a rebuilding year? Is it a can't really get much worse kind of thing? Where are we at here with the Cardinals defense?
It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of rebuilding / it can't get any worse. I mean, you mentioned the trade essentially is what it was. I mean, when Sermon was first hired, I mean, you look at his stats, and I think the Bulldogs are like in the 100s across the board, total passing, rushing. And people were just like, I mean, what are they doing? Like, and I think at the end of the day, Grantham and Petrino didn't get along, so they had to go their separate ways. Fine, whatever. But it was a lazy hire. I mean, let's be honest. I don't know, what Petrino saw in Sermon based on his 1 year body of work that was terrible at Mississippi State. I don't know how he thought that would transition into doing something positive at Louisville. Obviously, it was a failure. But to this season, that's the biggest question mark of this team. I think a lot of people nationally raised their eyebrows when Coach Petrino said that he thought the offense would be even better without Lamar Jackson. I tend to believe that it can, but defensively, it's just a big question mark. I do think the first team has a lot of talent. The depth will be lacking, but I certainly think once the first team is situated, Louisville's going to be using 3 transfers from big-name programs. Rajay Burns in the secondary, transfer from Ohio State, 4-star kid coming out of high school. Another 4-star kid, PJ Mbanassor, defensive back from Oklahoma that's transferred in. Another 4-star defensive end, Boosie Whitlow, who I would say probably one of the top 3 names in all of ACC. Boosie Whitlow will probably be starting on the defensive line somewhere as well. Those 3 guys are going to boost a defense that certainly needs that extra jolt of talent. Louisville has some returning studs in Dorian Etheridge. He was a freshman All-American at linebacker, started every single game. Jonathan Grenard will be opposite of Boosie Whitlow on the defensive end. Rush Yeast at cornerback, D. Smith, and Marlon Character at the safety positions. Rush Yeast was a 4-star Under Armour All-American. Trial by fire, though, man. He got smoked several times. There was a couple games where I felt bad for him, honestly. I mean, they were obviously picking on him, looked lost, but he did show glimpses of being a talented kid. With Brian Van Gorder's defense, I don't know a lot about him. Based on the hire, I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. Obviously, he got run off from Notre Dame because the defense wasn't very good. Once he left Notre Dame, I think, at least statistically, they were 8 points better in points given up, 8 less points given up after his departure. But again, it's one of those things. It can't get much worse. If Louisville's defense could be average, then I think that this is a 9 or 8 win team easily, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think Brian Van Gorder is obvious. I mean, Joey and I make fun of Brian Van Gorder endlessly on this podcast, as a lot of our listeners know at this point. But Brian Van Gorder is unquestionably an upgrade over Peter Sirmon. Unquestionably.
Yes, agreed.
Okay, well, good. That makes me feel a little bit better. I mean, I don't know how you could get. I mean, I think us 3 could probably do a better job than Sirmon did with the defense last year.
And I think when you said it was a lazy hire, I think that's, truthfully just like the perfect, really just the perfect description. And Joey and I haven't approached it from that angle at all. But, when you look at it and, he's brought in essentially, they don't really look at anybody else. They hire Peter Sirmon rather quickly. Like you said, he was, his defense at Mississippi State ranked in the hundreds across the board in his 1 year as the coordinator. Like,
it was the same day. It was crazy. I've never seen anything like that happen before.
If I'm not mistaken, he was also like a recruiting coordinator for Mississippi State as well. So I think the idea was maybe he'll recruit really well, but
yeah, that's what it was.
You don't hire a great recruiter to be your coordinator, right? Mm-hmm. Like that. That's a position coach, not a coordinator.
Exactly. I mean, again, that was a lot of people were saying the same thing. I think he had a really talented nephew playing quarterback. I think he's in Nashville, fringe 5-star kid, and people were speculating, well, maybe they're bringing him on as the DC to get his nephew. That never materialized. But I mean, guys, midway through the year, I mean, they would have their defensive backs would be 10 yards off the ball on a 3rd and 4. Now, I'm no football savant, but I could also say that doesn't make any sense. And then these offenses would eat them up. I mean, it was just like, well, yes. I mean, we heard the phrase, bend, don't break. I mean, Louisville was bend, getting in the red zone, then break. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, you knew what was going to happen almost every possession. But then, Louisville did have some injuries. Their first-round draft pick, Jair Alexander, who's reportedly playing really well for the Packers right now in training camp, he was hurt for well over half of the year. The games that he played, the defense looked better, and that's because he had his side of the field on lockdown. But when he wasn't hurt, the defense looked formidable. When he was hurt, the defense was awful.
That whole bend, break in the red zone thing is giving me flashbacks to the last 5 years of Ted Roof defense I've watched, for what it's worth.
Ooh, well, didn't Ted Roof, if I'm not mistaken, didn't he agree in principle to coach U of L, I think, for like a month, and then he never materialized and he went somewhere else and went to Auburn maybe? I want to say that if he wasn't officially named, he was going to be a coach, but then left before he officially started, I think, years ago.
I was going to say that must have been a while ago because I don't really remember what happened. I know he was Duke's head coach for a while, and then at some point he was Auburn's defensive coordinator when they won the national title, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's the best I got on Ted Roof history. I know that then he went to Penn State for a year, and then he went to Georgia Tech, where it's his alma mater, and that hasn't been a pleasant experience. So I hope NC State fans are enjoying him. He'll be a fine recruiting coordinator. He'll be fine.
Oh, there you go.
Let's talk about Bobby Petrino. Okay, we're in round 2 of the Bobby Petrino era. Obviously we're coming into his 5th year now with the program in his second stint. Obviously a much different situation in the second stint than the first, given where they are in the ACC. And it's really been an 8 or 9 win ceiling. And the best season arguably was really in 2016 when they were so close to, let's look at it this way. They're literally a yard and a half away from being on the doorstep to upset a Clemson team that wins the national championship.
Thanks for reminding me, Michael, about that. Thank you.
They lose to Houston on the road. They lose to Kentucky when Lamar Jackson played arguably his worst game, maybe one of the worst games of his career in that season finale in 2016. And then they ultimately lose the bowl game. But that's arguably the best year that Petrino's had since he's been back. It's just been a different tenure here. So I'm kind of curious as to what the temperature is of the fan base, especially coming off of last year where defense obviously performed quite poorly. And now we have a lot of questions as to, how the defense is going to be this year and what kind of rebuild it's going to be. So what's the fan base thinking about the Bobby Petrino era here for part 2?
That's a great question and something that we've discussed locally. This week, then on my show, Louisville Sports Live last night, we brought it up. I think let's look at the numbers first. In his second stint, he's 34-18, which is solid. 21-11 in the ACC. Again, pretty good. Not great, but good. But against ranked teams, he's 1-10. And, certainly on the surface, that's not good. I'm not going to be making excuses for that. A handful of those are top 10, top 5 Clemson, Florida State teams. And so that's understandable for Louisville not to beat those teams. I certainly understand that. I can get that. On the flip side, there's several games that Louisville had a chance to win and didn't. Now, I don't think Louisville fans, if there's a sample size of 11 games against ranked opponents in his first 4 years back, I think Louisville fans would be content at 4-7. 1-10, it's not acceptable. That's been a point of contention with a lot of Louisville fans. It's not a good look. Again, at 4-7, 3-8 even, if Petrino and his teams were to show that they can beat more than one ranked team in a 4-year span. Now, granted, that one win was phenomenal, the 63-20 beatdown of Florida State when College Game Day made their first appearance in Louisville. That was fantastic. That was a perfect all-around game. The temperature, Petrino is certainly not on the hot seat at all by any stretch. I will say this. We wrote a story on our site, LouisvilleSportsLive.net, this past week. It says, now is the year for Petrino to overachieve. Underwhelming, I think, is an adjective that you could use to describe his first 4 years. Either 9-4 or 8-5. And if we're being honest, he wasn't brought back to win 8 or 9 games. He was brought back to, flirt with 10-win seasons, to flirt with the New Year's 6. Like you said, Louisville's number 5 and 9-1 going into Houston. They were a 14-point favorite. And then they just got embarrassed, run off the field. And not only that, it compounded matters when they lost to perennial SEC scrub Kentucky at home on a fluke. Louisville was a 27-point home favorite. Lost that one, and then they weren't even competitive in the LSU bowl game. As you can tell, that still fires me up that I remember that. Mm-hmm. So going into this year, this is certainly a show-me year for Petrino. Again, he's not on the hot seat by any stretch. His seat isn't even lukewarm. However, if Louisville were to have another uninspiring season, 7-5, 6-6, with certainty, his seat will be getting warm. There's no doubt about that. But this right now, as of today, August 9th, heading into the season, I would certainly think fans they're not clamoring for his job by any stretch. They're a little. I think the best way to describe it is they're wait and see. They want to see something this year. They're not going to give him a pass because of last year's disappointment and then the collapse of 2016. So this is a show me year for Petrino in 2018, no doubt.
So put it this way, they're not clamoring for his job, but he also doesn't have a ton of equity built up with the fans. Is that fair?
I would say that. I think, you look at in something that we talk about on my show and the fans do as well, and it's worth bringing up on your all's podcast, is Louisville fans as a fan base, we're kind of confused on where to be. Are we good with being like an NC State, like middle of the pack, going 9-4, 8-5, 5-3 in the conference? Is that where we are, or are we striving for 10-win seasons, being ranked in the top 15 and flirting with that Orange Bowl berth, or New Year's Six? So we're in the middle there. But I think, though, too, that the tide can turn for the better. This is what we said this last night. The beauty of this season is Petrino is in total control. He wins 9 games, then all of this chatter that we're even discussing right now goes away, because it's all right. Petrino has overachieved this year. He answered the questions. He still has it. They fart around and go 7-5, 6-6, and there's going to be the grumbling will get loud, because remember, Louisville has a $55 million expansion to their stadium with a lot more luxury suites. So they've closed in the end zone now. It looks phenomenal. It's not finished yet, 30 days out. And then there's a guy up in West Lafayette, Indiana, the favorite son of Louisville football, and Jeff Brom. His first year at Purdue, they went 7-6. The 4 years prior to Brom's arrival, Purdue won 9 games. Brom won 7 in his first year. Right or wrong, the fans are keeping their eyes on Jeff Brom. And if Petrino were to go 7-5, but then Brom goes 7-5 at Purdue, there's a lot more excitement there. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Petrino, no doubt about it, after year 5. But we'll see. But if he goes 9-3 in the regular season, then all that dissipates. It goes away. That's the beauty of this season. There's a lot that Petrino can control to control that narrative of, are his years numbered at Louisville, or is he going to be here for the long term? And I think we're going to know one way or the other by late November this season.
For what it's worth, Ethan, I was there in person in the stadium at the 2016 Houston game, and it is, if not the single worst game viewing experience I've been there for any game of either of my 2 favorite teams. It is easily in the discussion. It was brutal.
Gosh, yeah, that was ugly.
Yeah. Let's stop talking about the past. Let's talk about this year. Want to talk about Louisville coming into this year, a new face on offense. Doesn't have to be a freshman, but someone that we haven't really heard of in the past. I think Puma Pass, probably the easiest name here, but is there a name on the offense at Louisville that we haven't really heard in the past that we are going to know by the end of this season?
I think tight end Kamari Averett. He's a big body guy, 6'6", 270, great hands, really agile for his size. Petrino, likes to use the double tight ends. He got a lot of run last year, not too much, but some he was able to show you glimpses of his talent. I think certainly Kamari Averett will be a name for fans to watch, and a name that he'll be a reliable tight end. I think also Mickey Crum is the other tight end. He's a senior. He's been stricken with injuries more so than not. So I'm going to give you 2 names, Kamari Averett and Mickey Crum, both tight ends. And I think you're going to see a lot more passes thrown their way, again, with the traditional passing game of Juwan Pass.
Is Mickey Denny's boy?
No. Great question. No, I forgot where Mickey's from. I want to say he's from the Midwest, but no, great. Louisville history. Yes, that's no relation as far as I'm concerned.
My dad taught me well.
Yes, he did.
How about new name on defense? So we got the 3 transfers you were alluding to earlier. Would it be one of those 3 guys or somebody else?
No, I'm going to give you Marlon Character. He is a 6', 185-pound safety, JUCO kid, high 3-star kid. He originally signed with Auburn, went the JUCO route. Coach Petrino is really high on him so far in the offseason. Pretty good size, really athletic. He's a ball hawk. Somebody that I think not only will crack the 2 deep, but could start. So Marlon Character is your name for Louisville on the defensive side at safety. Petrino, again, is really high on him. And, he's going to be there's certainly a lot of opportunity for him to come in and play because Louisville lost the majority of their secondary this past season.
Ethan, let's look at the schedule here. We've been breaking this up for all these teams into kind of 3 categories, these games of surefire wins, surefire losses, and toss-ups. Looking at this schedule and surefire wins, the 3 games I think that really stick out to me are home against Indiana State, home against Western Kentucky, and home against the University of Kentucky the last weekend of the year. Those are the 3 games that I think that pretty much no way, no how is Louisville going to lose this year. Even Kentucky being a rivalry game, it's like playing that game at home and what I expect from the Wildcats. Like I don't see Louisville losing that game. How do you feel about those 3 games, and are there any others on the schedule that you're like, no way, no how is Louisville going to lose that game?
The first week against Alabama.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm
going to get my pen out and
I didn't want to roll Tide coming to my house and pitchforks and stuff. No, I give you Indiana State and Western as surefire wins. I would put I'll have another category. I think 75% chance or better. I would throw Kentucky in there, and that's because it's weird. I don't know what it is, but Louisville has a better record against Kentucky and Lexington than they do in Louisville. It's weird. I don't know. I mean, Petrino obviously, is 7-1 against them in his 2 years here in Louisville, but the one loss was at home. So I'll give you the 2 surefire wins for me: Indiana State, Western. I think the wins with 75% chance or better are at Virginia, Kentucky, at Syracuse, and Wake Forest. And so now the 2 surefire losses, I think there's only 2 losses that I'm going into the season with, chalking them up. No surprise here, Alabama and Clemson. Louisville and Petrino, like I mentioned earlier, 1-10 against ranked teams. I think with those, that's going to make it 1-12. Another little factoid, every time he's played Louisville in Petrino's second stint against a ranked SEC opponent, he's 0-4 with an average margin of loss of about 13.5 points. So, again, I'm not expecting anything with Alabama. They're on a different level. Clemson's on a different level. Now, 3 out of the 4 years against Clemson, Louisville has battled them. You could easily make the argument that Louisville should have won 2 of those 3 games. But at the end of the day, they didn't make the plays to do that. So those are the 2 for sure losses. 50-50 toss-ups. Florida State. Georgia Tech, Joey, on a Friday night. At Boston College, and then NC State at home. Those are my 4 toss-up games. I think Louisville could split those. I think it's reasonable to expect that. But I think the Florida State game, it's going to come down. Louisville season, I think, is going to come down to 3 games. Florida State, Georgia Tech, and Boston College. The end of September, beginning of October. If Louisville goes 2-1 in that, then I think 8 or 9 wins is possible. I could see Louisville beating Florida State for the 3rd straight year. It's at home. The Taggart's still getting his guys, situated. Now, I could see Louisville also losing a close one to Florida State. The stadium's going to be hype. Now, it's a blackout for Georgia Tech, but I could see them on just, 6 days to prepare an emotionally draining game, win or lose against Florida State. I could see, the Yellow Jackets coming in there and getting a win. And then at Boston College, I mean, I think A.J. Dillon scored again on Louisville. He rushed for 272 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. I mean, it seemed like to me after that game, he just got done running a 5K against Louisville's defense. It was that bad. So that's a vital 3-game stretch, but I would put those 3 games too are the 50-50 toss-ups. And it's, again, Petrino's paid $4 million a year. This is year 5, and this is where most of the fans will fall back on that experience. And, it's reasonable to expect Louisville should win 2 out of those 3 games, but we'll see. They haven't. They didn't last year.
My turn, Joe. Yeah,
you're up.
Indiana State, Western Kentucky, I think are 2 pretty safe bets. I like Louisville's chances against Kentucky at the end of the year because they do get it at home. But that was an interesting point, Ethan, that you brought up that Louisville actually has more success in Lexington against Kentucky than they do at home. That's very interesting. The surefire losses, I think, are Alabama and Clemson. Alabama neutral site game that it doesn't matter where you play them. They're just, they're Alabama. Clemson on the road. It's hard to imagine Clemson losing any games this year, period. They've had some great teams and they've had some great teams that have been upset. So there's always one and there's always an opportunity, but just to see Clemson losing at home to a rebuilding Louisville, I think would be a pretty big surprise to everybody.
It would indeed.
Looking at the rest of the schedule, at Virginia, I think they'll have a pretty good shot of winning that game on the road. Going to Virginia is a very weird place to play, but I like Louisville's chances there. And everything you said about that 3-game stretch here at the end of September and into the first 2 weeks of October, I completely agree. I think that completely defines Louisville's season and the direction in which it goes. That Florida State game, I think, is very winnable. Sure. I honestly think that. I think Florida State's a very talented team, but I think Louisville's going to have an opportunity there. Petrino's had success against Florida State, obviously, the last couple of years. Florida State will be a lot better this year, but you do get that game at home, and I think that's important. Georgia Tech, complete toss-up game to me. That could go a number of different directions. Georgia Tech's another team I expect to be pretty good, but you get that game at home. And then on the road at BC, that's one of the toughest games on the schedule, and nobody's going to talk about it that way. Boston College, I think, has an opportunity to, again, be a very good team. They have the best running back in the conference, and like you said, he had a ton of success against them last year, so it brings back those bad memories. But I think Louisville's got an opportunity there to kind of get back and figure things out defensively and try to slow down A.J. Dillon, even though that game's on the road. I'll give my record prediction now, Joey, just to get it out of the way. I'm going to say 7-5. I could see it better than that. I could easily see it at 8-4 at the very least. But 7-5 is what I'm going to go with. Indiana State, Western Kentucky are the locks. I think they likely beat Virginia. But I think that stretch, Florida State, Georgia Tech, BC, I would not be surprised if Louisville lost at least 2 of those games. I think if they do lose 2 of those games, that's where we see them falling in kind of that 7-5 range. But there are going to be a lot of toss-up games this year on Louisville's schedule. That's just kind of the way things are laid out with a rebuilding program. So it can go a number of different directions. I'm going to play it very, very conservative here and say 7-5. That might be on the low end. I'd be surprised if they were worse than that. I think they'll definitely make a bowl game at the very least. But that's where I'm going to go this year with a rebuilding program, which will make things very interesting. Seeing what the temperature of the program is going to be, especially if Jeff Brom has another successful year at Purdue, because I don't think 7-5 is going to cut it there at Louisville with those fans, like you mentioned.
Mike, you're right. If Louisville goes 7-5 and Brom gets Purdue another bowl game, it'll get a little dicey. I'll tell you that.
I can imagine there will be some unrest within the fan base, to say the least. So I've already said I think that what you're looking at at minimum is 3-2, right? 3 wins, Indiana State, Western Kentucky. I'm sticking with my guns on Kentucky. I think by the end of the year, I don't see Kentucky winning this game against Louisville, especially in Louisville. 2 losses, Alabama at Clemson. So the other 7 games, here's what I'm looking at. So first of all, I like to talk in ranges of where I think these teams could end up. I think this team ends up, I've been kind of low on them all off season. I'm starting to come around on them a little bit. I think the low end for Louisville is probably 6-6. I think the ultra high end, like absolute best case scenario, is probably like 9-3.
I would agree.
But what I would say is that there are 3 specific scheduling quirks that I hate in Louisville's schedule. Number 1 is getting Georgia Tech on short rest after Florida State. That's not great. Number 2 is getting Boston College on the road. Number 3 is getting Syracuse on the road on a Friday night. Those 3 things all 3 look, fairly ominous to me if I'm looking at what I think Louisville's going to end up at.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I look at those other, 7 games that I didn't previously mention, I'm going to lean 3-4, which is going to be, I guess, 6-6. They could be 4-3. You could come away 1-2 in those 3 games. It's nice that you get Florida State at home. It's good that you get Wake Forest at home, NC State at home. Those are some of those games that should be significantly tougher. If you go 2-1 in that stretch, I think you're doing okay. But Ethan, I think you were spot on about that 3-game stretch. Again, Florida State, Georgia Tech, at Boston College is very, very indicative of what the rest of the season is going to look like. I'm going to stick with my guns. I've been pessimistic this whole offseason. I'm going to say 6-6 for Louisville. I don't love it. I am discouraged. I want them to prove me wrong. Again, I'm a Louisville fan. I want them to do well. I've heard that Jawan Pass might be the second coming of Cam Newton, and that would be fantastic for this program. But I think I'm going to go 6-6 here and hope that Bobby Petrino proves me wrong. And if not, like you've mentioned, hey, Jeff Brom's waiting in the wings, and he's not that far away. That's only like a 3-hour drive.
Yeah. Yeah, less than. I don't know if any Louisville fans have monitored that closely yet. But if Louisville were to go, to match your predictions of 6-6 or 7-5, then yes, there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of rumbling. But if I may, I'll give my prediction. I think Louisville goes 8-4. I think that they do better than a lot of national publications are predicting them, which is 6-6. I think the offense is going to go back to its balanced style, the balanced attack. I think an important factoid to mention is prior to last year, in the group of Wake Forest, NC State, and Boston College, Louisville was a collective 9-0. They hadn't lost to any of those 3 schools, and then they turned around, flipped the script, lost to those 3 last year. I don't see that happening again. Now, will they lose to one of those 3 teams? Good chance of that. But I don't see them dropping all 3 of those games. You guys mentioned the home game. Getting NC State at home is a big deal. I think, again, it's a 75% chance that Louisville beats Wake at home. I think they're going to take care of business at Virginia. I think they're going to take care of business at Syracuse. That's 4 conference wins right there. I think they'll get one of Georgia Tech or Florida State. I could see Louisville beating both of those teams. I could see Louisville losing to both. It's one of those things. There is a lot of question marks with this team, and that's what makes it kind of fun. But I do think a lot of times it's not getting talked about a lot. Is when Petrino's teams don't have that target on their back, they always seem to rise to the occasion. They always seem to overachieve and do better. They are a much better team when they're the hunter, not the hunted.
Ethan, Vegas's win total is 7 for Louisville. Are you going over?
Over. Yep.
You putting money on that?
You know what? If it depends. A lot of the sports books that I see have it at 7.5, so it's a little bit dicier. But if I get it at 7, I would put money on 8. I really do think, I think the defense will be better. If the defense is just average, that's all it has to be. I don't expect it to be spectacular. I don't know a lot about Notorious BVG yet. Mike was scaring me a little bit in the open about him. But again, it's almost impossible for Louisville to be any worse defensively. If they are just average, then I think Louisville could easily win 8 or 9 games. And healthy. They got to stay healthy as well, because I like the Louisville's defensive talent on the first team, but depth will be a factor, the lack of it.
I just want to not to completely circle back, but we were talking about the schedule a minute ago. I think it's absolutely criminal that the ACC allows Louisville to play Georgia Tech on a Friday right after they get Florida State. So they get Georgia Tech on short rest, an option offense they're not going to see anywhere else the entire season.
Yep.
And then at Clemson on November 3rd, and then on short rest, they have to go to the Carrier Dome, which is a very, very tough place to play.
It is.
On short rest after you play arguably one of the best, not arguably, one of the best teams in the country in Clemson.
I didn't even look at it like that. You're right. Yeah. That's another Friday night kickoff. And then that's when, of course, they beat Clemson last year. And it was weird. Syracuse didn't win a game the rest of the year after they beat Clemson. And then Clemson went on to the college football playoff. Crazy times. But there was a great point, Mike. Yeah. It's the, third to last game of the season. I'm sure, the Orange will be hovering around bowl eligibility. If Louisville is not locked in, I mean, they could take a loss there.
We've seen a random upset there before. So this wouldn't be the first time. It definitely won't be the last if Louisville were to lose on the road at the Carrier Dome on a random Friday night. So
the good news is it's November, so God knows who will be healthy and who won't for Syracuse at that point.
You're right. I mean, Eric Dungy, that poor kid, he can't catch a break. That kid is a phenomenal talent, man, when healthy. I mean, it's a shame that he can't, catch a break and stay healthy.
I don't know if he can't catch a break so much he can't get any help. Nobody.
Well, that too. Yeah.
They won't block for him. They won't catch for him.
Yeah, it's tough. And when he's laying on his back all the time, I mean, it's tough to complete a pass that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He was Joey's pick last year he was preseason. In our picks, he was Joey's preseason ACC Player of the Year, which I thought was a phenomenal pick because he was a guy that nobody would actually bet on. It was a nice pick to go outside of the box because Eric Dungy he's a phenomenal player, but he cannot stay on the field.
Yeah, I know. So I mean, I hope he has a great season, except on November 9th. But we'll see. It speaks though to how much better the ACC has gotten overall. I mean, especially the ACC Atlantic. I mean, listen, you want to talk about the toughest division in college football. I mean, last year you had NC State who kind of they finished in the top 25. I mean, obviously Clemson's a beast. Now this year you go back to have Florida State ranked in most people's top 20s. Then you have a lot of solid teams again, like NC State, like a Louisville. Now Wake Forest is even better. I mean, they went 8-5 and beat Texas A&M in their bowl game. I mean, when you think of Wake Forest football, you don't think, wow, but they won 8 games and beat a decent A&M team in their bowl game. And then Virginia, they went to a bowl game. Now I think they're 6-4, then lost the last 3, something like that. But I mean, Boston College, obviously, they come in there. Louisville, 20-point favorites at home, lost 45-42. Because they couldn't stop 2 plays, handoff to Dillon, and they couldn't stop a bootleg play action to their tight end running across the field. Peter Sermon's defense, I mean, literally from my seat in the end zone, they were going to do, this is going to be where the quarterback fakes a handoff, rolls out, and then hits the receiver, 10-yard, 15-yard gain, first down. Literally, they did that 3 separate times on the same drive. The guy was wide open all 3 times.
Well, thank God for the Notorious BVG. Here he comes.
And his goatee in all of his glory.
Well, there you have it. Ethan, this has been an awesome preview. It should be a very intriguing season for Louisville, to say the least. Again, a lot of guys to replace, a lot of questions over what will be better or worse. But I think this has given an absolute fantastic look into what this will or won't be. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great time. Tell the people where they can find your work, where they can hear your content.
Great. LouisvilleSportsLive.net is the website. We're on Twitter at Elville Sports without an O live. And then we're on the local ESPN affiliate, 93.9 The Ville FM. And, of course, you could stream that on iHeart, TuneIn app, and the 939theville.com as well.
And go find him at _Ethan Moore on Twitter. Ethan, thanks for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Please come back soon. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks, guys, for having me. And then congrats, Joey, for Georgia Tech finally going with Adidas and dumping Russell Athletic.
It is a good day, Ethan. It's a good day to be alive.
I saw that. Thanks, guys, for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, brother. All right, Mike, we got to get out of here. We got more teams we got to preview. In the meantime, they can find us on Twitter. I am at FTRS Joey. He is at Mike McDaniel CFB, and together we're at BC Podcast ACC. And once again, he is at _Ethan Moore and at Elville Sports Live without an O in there. Y'all can find us on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, the Overcast app, wherever fine podcasts are sold for free. And you can also send us an email to the longest email address known to man, basketballconferencepodcast@gmail.com.
Nailed it.
Yes, I did. By the way, we got one for the Georgia Tech podcast, Andrew Parker, asking very cheeky questions. We'll get to that. But if you have questions on the other teams that we haven't previewed yet, please send them in. We'll get to those, I promise. Mike, tell them where they can find us on the social medias.
Facebook.com/basketball conference, rate, review, find all of our podcasts there. Got the BC podcast that's gone up, Pitt coming up too as well. We'll have that posted. All of our podcasts are found there, all the season previews. Rate and review us on iTunes. I pinned a link to our profile on Twitter. Go check that out. We've had a lot of rates and reviews since I have done that. Please go check that out. It's right there on our Twitter page. You'll find it right there as a pinned tweet at the top.
Please do so. Again, at BC Podcast ACC. Mike, anything else before we get out of here?
I think we're good. More season previews coming.
Yes, sir. More previews coming. Well, for that guy, Mike McDaniel, and for our guest, Ethan Moore, I am Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. And until then, go ACC.